This is the Sega AtGames, or the AtGames Sega Genesis, that has made the rounds online, right? People have talked about it, reviewed it, and for the most part, a lot of people didn't like it. The menu was cumbersome to go around and actually pick out games you want. Emulation wasn't very good, the sound was bad, and even compatibility with the actual cartridges, because this does play cartridges, wasn't the best. There was still a lot of glitching, but I still wanted to pick one up, and I still want to do a tech wave on it because I wanted to open it up and, I guess, take a look inside of this thing and see how cheaply they made this. Now, it could be made well, but I do know AtGames is more on the cheaper side of things when it comes to building these. This wasn't exactly the cheapest product. I believe it was $70, and this has 85 games, and it's all built in. It comes with 2 controllers. They're not IR controllers anymore. We used to, basically when you had like the Fire Core system, you would have to point the controller at the system, and that's how it would communicate with it, which was poor. Well, let's say that. It was very poor. The Retron 3 did that for a while too, and then they fixed it as well. So it's 2.4 gigahertz at least, right? So it's much better when it comes to actually working and functioning. We're going to take this guy apart, though. It does function through HDMI 720p. This box is much larger, I think, than it needs to be. If you look at something like the NES Classic box or the Super Nintendo Classic box, they're much smaller, and they pretty much house the same stuff. Technically, they house a bit more, as they come with like a cool poster and everything. This mostly just has the instructions set up in a big fold-out, kind of like this, and that's about it. Everything else is just in there. They don't include even bags around the stuff. You know, like you'll get something and it'll be in like a nice little bag to kind of protect it. This does not, and it already has a bunch of junk on it, even though I just opened it. Even with the controllers, no bag or anything, power cord, everything. It's all just in there. It's free floating. So we have our Sega AtGames Genesis Flashback system. Manufacturer is Shenzhen, China. So there you go. It is out of China, which is not, I mean, that's not the biggest deal. We see, obviously, it's where the manufacturing is the cheapest. Fortunately, I believe this is all Phillips head, and okay, I see 2, there's gotta be more on here. I see 2 Phillips heads on the bottom here. Yeah, okay, good, there are more. They're underneath the rubber footing. I was gonna say, are they holding this together with 2? It's not heavy, it's very, very light. Power cord, does use a proprietary plug, 2 amps, 5 volt, 2 amp. They probably could have made that like a micro USB. They probably could have done that. And then we have our 2 different controllers that actually have rewind function on them, so that's kind of neat, I guess. Rewind. They're 6-button, and the D-pad is at least rolling. You know what? They've done worse. They've done worse controllers than this. This is not the worst controller in the world I've seen from them, or Hyperkin with their Retron 3. Those were terrible. Go look at those. And that's it. Nothing else in here. They decided not to give us a poster like we got with the NES Classic, for example, or any little extras. 2 controllers, though, so that's cool. But you can use your standard controllers on the front here. It does have that functionality, so that's neat. Whether it's good or not, well, that's up to you. I do see some people actually like it. Some people are excited with it because if it's like if it's somebody who just wants to play it and they don't care as much about the nuances of the games or the sound quality or anything, they're probably going to get a kick out of this, right? Like if you have like a brother or sister or mom and dad who really liked their Sega Genesis back in the day and the games and everything, and you get this for them, they'll probably have a blast with it, especially if they're not super into games or they're like a hardcore enthusiast or anything. They'll probably enjoy it. Let's see, a couple Phillips head screws here, and then we have some, I believe, under the little rubber feet, and I bet you it's going to open right up. I have no idea what is in here, and that's going to be the fun part, because I guess we're going to look up the chips and see what we have going on in here. So far, getting into this, I'm not very confident in how well built these are for the price. I mean, keep in mind, this is more expensive than the NES Classic, right? And sure, it has a cartridge slot on the top, and it technically has more games, but I feel like quality over quantity, right? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see here in a minute. So, as far as I can tell, there are 6 screws. We'll get these last couple off here, and then we should be able to pop it open, and I doubt there's going to be much more keeping us from anything. Like, I doubt there's a... Hopefully I'm wrong. I doubt there's a heatsink of any kind in here because how light it is. The NES Classic technically has a heatsink. And of course, just for fun, they decided to hide a screw underneath the little sticker down here. That's usually something I've dealt with before, especially with like the original Xbox did that on the bottom. I remember that. That was a nice little trick they did to hide it, and they could kind of tell you're tampering with it then. So there we go, we got everything off, and this comes up, and we're immediately met with something that's actually still attached. It is the power button, the power switch, I should say, not the button. The LED is also still attached, and good news right away, right? They're not plugged in, they're all soldered, so it does not look like any of these connections are removable. And that's fun. This is something you see with a lot of companies that try to save money. I see this mostly with stuff from China, for example. And it was very obvious in the tablets that I work on and some of the older Hyperkin products. I think some of the newer ones do too, like the Retron 5, for example. Not a lot of the stuff inside unplugged. It was all soldered. I think the 2 also, Retron 2, because they actually soldered the boards together and everything with cable. So, right away, by the way, here, you want to see this? There's our board. That's how big the board is. So, you guys remember how small the new one is now? This one probably could have been that same size. Remember how they're holding up and it's tiny? People are like, wow, that's so much small. This one could have been that same size. And I also noticed something else in here too. Let's get this. I gotta actually unscrew this because it's soldered in, so give me a minute. So I got this top part off, and we can kind of see it here. It's all pretty much soldered together, right? There's our on-off switch there. I want to get this board out too, though. Take a look around that. Everything's still connected, so I'm going to basically be picking up like this whole spider web of cables and everything. And everything's going to be like, kind of still attached to the front of it. I'm noticing that all of these have pretty straightforward tracing and everything, and I wonder if you don't care about these plugs and you're just going to use your wireless ones, you could probably just remove this, put these on here or make your own switches, because these are just standard switches. This is an LED, you might not even care about the LED. And I wonder if you could seriously 3D print your own case and just eliminate this large case and make like a little tiny one. I mean, seriously, look how small that is. I guess, honestly, if people also wanted to build their own handheld out of this, it has HDMI out. This would probably be a very easy one to do. As you can see how small it is. That would be really neat to try that. I'm really curious if someone want to do that. It also runs off of the 5 volt like this, and I see one port on here that I want to point out to you guys that might also help other people who want to try to build this into a handheld if they have not already. The internet's crazy, people might have already done it. Let me take this out and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. Okay, so there's some funny stuff going on with this thing. Here's our board, right? This is it right here. This part here, all these gray cables going down, if somebody really wanted to turn this into a handheld, they could easily eliminate all of this. Like, this could easily be eliminated, and they could probably still retain these ports if they really wanted to, but more than likely they would probably just map it out and then actually solder up buttons and everything and make that all work. This could all probably be eliminated here, and then you would be left with this board. What's really funny is, I noticed this right away when I took this off. There's a chip here that is our antenna, Bluetooth, 2.4 gigahertz, whatever you want to go with there. And what's funny is they have this red cable coming off. It flips around to the back, and it's not attached to anything. That's their antenna. They just soldered a wire in there for their antenna. And that's how they're making that work, which is really funny. And they also have another little button on here that I'm not really sure what that's for. There's just a button on there, just hanging out. But we also have I have to see what this does exactly, because it's just in there. They just left the port on there. There is a USB port on there. Well, I have no idea why. I'll get you guys a full picture of this board and everything, but I don't know what that's doing there, and I wonder if it could actually be used for something. And someone will have to see if that's power or data related or anything. I'm not sure. How about I look up these chips though real quick, which I'll get you pictures of as well, because we should have a processor, we should have flash memory, and then we should, of course, the RAM as well. So let's look up the specs for this thing while we're at it. So I've done some research on the CPU. I'm going to show you guys a picture of it here. It's called the Monkey King 3.6, and I have no idea what that is, so I did a little research on it, and other people have looked into it too. By the way, that USB port that I pointed out apparently works, and you can actually plug this into your computer and get a little more information about it, and it comes up as a rebranded Rockchip RK3036 SoC. It's a dual-core Cortex A7 processor and a Mali 400 MP GPU, and it runs Android 4.4. Yes, that's right. It's all running off of Android 4.4. Now, the storage chip and the RAM, they're a little more straightforward to figure out. It appears that it has 4 gigabytes of onboard storage for its storage flash RAM. And then the actual RAM itself, the memory, appears to come in 2 different quantities, either 128 megabytes or 256 megabytes. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say 256, but there's a good chance with AtGames and trying to make it as cheap as possible, might just be 128 megabytes, because you don't need a ton to run just Genesis games, although if they are running through 720p on HDMI, maybe they would opt for the 256 with this kind of, I guess, this hardware configuration and setup. But obviously, some of the more fascinating things are that it runs Android. It has a USB port that does communicate to your computer, which is interesting, because that means maybe you can modify and do other stuff with this if people really get into it. And, of course, it has a processor and everything that would at least be strong enough to do some basic Android tasks. And it's all passively cooled, and this whole thing down here can be removed, probably even the cartridge slot if you want. And you could probably make some pretty cool stuff with just this little board and like a handheld and still retain some of the same functionality that we have, well, now, just in maybe a more handheld format. It's kind of weird, but it also kind of gives us a look into what AtGames might be doing with their newer one that's coming up, where maybe they are sticking with this same type of design, and they're just eliminating a lot of this extra stuff to make it smaller. This was definitely a cosmetic decision with how different and how large this is. Build quality is still not very good, though. I'll be honest. This is similar to stuff I would have seen that would have come out of China for like those cheaper tablets that you can see, stuff like that. When everything's soldered like this, and they're not even doing like plug-in or anything internally, that tells me that they are built to not really be replaced or do anything with. If they break, and that's it. So take it as you will there. If you damage one of these, pins or whatnot, or this power button or anything, it's probably not coming back. But let me know what you guys think about this whole thing. It looks like they did add their own wireless chip to it right here. So that's something. And of course, they just leave their little antenna floating around. That's so funny. I mean, I did that with the Joy-Cons, so hey, there you go. Why not, right? But yeah, guys, that's going to do it for our look at the Sega AtGames, or AtGames Sega Genesis, even though they put the logos in the different... It doesn't matter. So I'm not going to be smashing this with my typical hammer, and I'm going to tell you why. Do you remember how I just told you that this is probably for the public that doesn't usually play a lot of games like a lot of us do, where we're big enthusiasts with this stuff, and we nitpick the sound and visuals and compatibility? Well, I brought this home after picking it up for this video, and I put it on the kitchen table in the box and everything, because the box is massive, of course, for, the little board that's in here. And my wife goes, "What's that for?" She liked the Genesis back in the day, so now, instead of destroying this, I have to go find AAA batteries, because why would these charge, right? Don't worry, though. I'm sure I have something else, guys, that that hammer can take care of, okay? So thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time. AAA batteries, though.